Welcome back, everybody, after lunch. Hope you all managed to get a book if you wanted one. Ben is going to come back at 3:15. He's got to nip off and do a little job. And he's coming back at 3:15 if you want to get your book signed then. So I'd like to introduce Edie to you, who is the dog, because that's probably the most interesting thing at the minute that's going on behind us. Edie is Ben's dog, and she's going to sit there throughout his keynote and enjoy it like the rest of us. Ben says that she runs towards applause, so maybe we just clap really quietly. We don't want a kamikaze type experience off the stage. We're really pleased that Ben has come to speak to us today for our keynote. He is a director, he's an author, he's an actor. He has much to offer us and much to say. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ben. Thank you.
Silently, if out of not knowable night's utmost nothing wanders a little guess, only which is this world, more of my life does not leap than with the mystery your smile sings, or if spiraling as luminous they climb oblivion, voices who are dreams less into heaven, certainly earth swims, then each my deeper death becomes your kiss. Losing through you what seems myself, I find selves unimaginably mine. Beyond sorrow's own joys and hoping's very fears, yours is the light by which my spirit's born. Yours is the darkness of my soul's return. You are my sun, my moon, and all my stars. E. Cummings. Happy National Poetry Day. Oh, I was really nervous then. I've never spoken that poem out loud in front of anybody before, let alone 1,000 teachers. I'm speaking it in a week or so at the wedding of a Shakespeare theatre company that I've started working with in New Hampshire. And I wanted to practice it, so I appreciate that. God, he's hard to read. It's hard to speak. I hated Shakespeare when I was younger. And now I have a tattoo of his writing on my arm, in my mum's writing, my dad's handwriting, and my grand's, and it says, "Nothing will come of nothing." And it reminds me every day as a self-employed artist to get out of bed and create. It reminds me of the journey that I've been on with Shakespeare. That started, admittedly, in school, hating it. And then I was cast as Ariel in The Tempest when I was 17 in an amateur dramatics company in Holyhead in North Wales, and we were performing it outside in an amphitheatre, so of course it was raining. And all of my friends were coming to see it, and I was very nervous about this, and I was a bit envious of my other friends in the cast because they all had a relatively easy job to do. Prospero can be a wizard and Miranda can be a daughter, and my friend who was playing Caliban, half man, half fish, son of a witch, physical theatre, that's easy, right? I mean, he didn't do that, but you know what I mean. A spirit of the air. I mean, I can meditate for the rest of my life. I will never fly. As ever with theatre, you think it's all going to come together when you get the costume. And I remember the dress rehearsal, which of course was the night before the first performance. And I went to my dressing room and my name was on the door. And I walked in, and of course it was the utility room because they only had one dressing room and the ladies had that. So we were in the utility room, rightly so. And underneath my name was a pile of Well, actually, there wasn't a pile of anything. You really think a character might come together when you get the costume. Underneath my name was 2 golden handkerchiefs and a piece of string. And underneath the handkerchiefs was a pot of golden paint. By the time I was finished, I looked like a candle. Lit, of course. Never acted before. I'd only done musicals, character parts in musicals, and I remember in the rain, crouching by the side of the amphitheatre, waiting to come on, and I was, my hands were sweating, but my mouth was dry. And I was really thirsty, but I needed the toilet, and was that my cue? I was really, really, really nervous, and I still wasn't sure how I was supposed to make this character fly. Was that my cue? There was silence on the stage. And I heard Peter, who was playing Prospero for the 3rd time, rather impatiently now, shout my cue, and my body decided to go even if my brain wasn't ready, and I leapt over the front row and onto the stage, and the next thing I remember, I was off stage, and it was over, and my only memory was that I'd flown. Until that point, having learned Shakespeare by heart and given it to an audience, the audience circled the square as it was. It was the other half of the sphere that had been missing for me when I'd been reading it in a book. It changed my life. Connecting with Shakespeare in that way absolutely transformed my life. It's the reason that I'm standing here before you today. Well, that and the English teacher, Mr. Hewitson, Gerald now, who helped me understand poetry, who helped me appreciate poetry. The combination of him and performing is what's brought me here today. I bumped into him last night, funnily enough. I was at my parents' home in Wales, and I was a little bit unsure about what I was going to talk to you about, actually. And seeing him again brought it all home, and we talked about what we've been reading in the papers yesterday, and he texted me this morning as well with more news. That you guys have a tough job. I come into schools at least twice a month, as much as I possibly can, and it's partly to work with the kids, and it's partly to work with you all. And I read, just yesterday, that teachers are leaving the country. I also read today that for the first time since 2002, public opinion is towards increasing taxes to support health and education and social services, and thank goodness. I also read in the paper today that we seem to feel that we're losing empathy, that in a fractured and polarized society, says Bear Grylls. It's a great name. We need empathy and we need kindness more than ever before. And although it is, some people think that it can be genetically passed on, empathy that is, it can be learned. Empathy can be learned. I have learned so much from Shakespeare. He has taught me empathy and self-expression and self-knowledge and the power of oracy, the power of being able to stand on my own feet and say how I feel, sometimes using my words, sometimes using his. And he's so generous. I think he's the most generous writer I've ever encountered. I remember the first time I performed, I'm allowed to say it, Macbeth. I'm on the stage, it's okay. There's a rumble of disagreement there. And he says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee, I have thee not, and yet I see thee still." "50 miles away, in 1605, 1606, when Shakespeare wrote those lines, 50 miles away, in Cambridge, scholars, the best academic minds of the time, were trying to work out whether or not it was actually possible to create matter with the power of your mind. They didn't know. They didn't know if you could go cappuccino, koala bear. They had no idea. Now, how Shakespeare found out about it, how did he find out about anything? I don't know. They say that the public performances at the Globe were merely open rehearsals for the time when the company would take their plays to the court to perform before the monarchs. But what a gift. What a hugely generous gift to the people that had paid a penny, that were standing around the stage, to gift them that idea. What do you think? Do you think it's possible? Is this a dagger which I see before me? For people who were fined if they didn't go to church, to ask them, essentially, with to be or not to be. That is the question. What do you think happens after this life? Is there life after death? The generosity of the man to gift these ideas to the minds that were not expecting them, that were coming for entertainment, for a bit of blood and a bit of fight, a laugh and maybe a cry. If it were done when 'tis done, well, it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surceased success, if but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here up on this bank and school of time, I'm getting carried away. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence, he never mentions the word murder. It's almost like he can't quite handle the idea. So much so that in the first folio that word assassination is capitalized, capital A. Indeed, it's the first instance of the word in print that we know of. Shakespeare invented the word assassination for that moment, for Macbeth. So novel is the idea to him. So terrifying is the idea to him. And another gift, boom, crash, into the audience's minds. Synapses being created. Imagine the Christmas tree of the brain that an academic in Liverpool has proven sparks when we read poetry, sparks when we read Shakespeare. Imagine the lights in your head going off when a new word is heard for the first time, and a word that you understand. Grace me no grace, nor uncle me no uncle. Taking a noun like that and verbing it. Imagine people leaving the theater, going home and talking to their nieces and nephews and quoting this new word for the first time. These people who by and large were not literate, who hadn't had an education, being gifted by their playwright. So generous. I've been doing some work recently with younglings in SEND schools. Do you know, I found out a year or so ago that younglings with autism, rather than struggling with Shakespeare, they appreciate and understand that emotion is tied to the structure of the poetry in a way that neurotypical students actually struggle with. The generosity that seems to transcend every walk of life. in every part of the world. He is truly universal. And he has taught me empathy for my fellow man. And how on earth we teach this to the next generation of potential bardoholics? My way, that I dug in real deep, was to find my way, and I did it through the Sonnets, 154 of these little parcels of love poetry. Because there's one in there that will talk to you. There's one in there that will tell you about how you're feeling today. And a bit like the Tao or the I Ching, you'll come back to it in a week or 2 weeks or a month, and you'll have more life experience in you and in your heart. Another break, another loss, another gain, another happiness. And you'll understand it a little bit better, a little bit differently. The universality of his work, which became even more universal to me when I started working in original practices at the Globe a few years ago and started exploring original pronunciation. I grew up being told that my voice was not right for Shakespeare. I grew up being told that I had to speak Shakespeare and receive pronunciation, the accent that everybody for the last 150 years have been speaking Shakespearean. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. How inconvenient. Shakespeare will hold a mirror up to life. If you can find that which gives you passion in these works, that which will hold a mirror up to your heart and your life, perhaps that's the way for helping younglings to find their first step with Shakespeare. Learning a line, learning 14 lines, and encouraging them to speak it in their voice, to stop it from being the property of the elite. Because the accent that Shakespeare and his actors spoke in is now all over the world. Anyone that speaks English has traces, already speaks original pronunciation, as we call it, already has flecks of the accent that Shakespeare and his actors themselves spoke. And when people hear it, they think, it sounds familiar. It sounds sort of where I come from. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Why would anyone want to be compared to a summer's day? In Britain, I mean. It's hot. It's too hot. And then the clouds come. And then it rains. And there's wasps and ants when you have a picnic. Summer's miserable. Why would you want to compare your love to a summer's day? And we know it must be his love or her love, because he says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, the informal thee, rather than shall I compare you to a summer's day, the formal you. In fact, he says, no, summer's rubbish. I'm not going to compare you to summer. In fact, you're not going to die. Death is never going to brag that he's claimed your soul. All right, Shakespeare, calm down. How's that possible? Because I'm going to write your beauty into this sonnet. And in 400 years' time, a red-headed actor is going to stand slightly terrified in front of 1,000 teachers and talk about you. And so your beauty will live forever, and you will live forever. And this sound that I believe is the bridge back to a place where anyone can speak Shakespeare because they want to. That there is no right sound for this amazing collection, this wonderful work of art. That all you have to do is find the bit that opens your heart to it and share it. Shall I compare it to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely, more temperate. Rough winds to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lace at all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, perchance, or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me today.
Well done. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben, and Edie, he was just so brilliantly behaved. Ben, that was absolutely fantastic. It's wonderful, isn't it, to be transported out of what we were just in before